excited to get into our next conversation. Joining me in a moment is Jad Shimaly, who's the Global Managing Partner for Client Services at EY. Jad's a really seasoned executive. He's got nearly 30 years of experience in advanced business performance, bringing a deep financial and operational acumen to his global leadership position at EY. Prior to that role, he was also actually the Chair, CEO and Regional Managing Partner at EY Canada as well, which is the second fastest growing EY firm globally. I found that really cool to learn. Leading a team there of more than 8,000. Now there's a workforce of more than 400,000. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation, not only about the trends that Jad is seeing, given the incredibly diverse and global portfolio of EY's clientele, but equally, running such a large business through such a significant transformation, making new strategic bets, navigating all of that. I look forward to everything we're going to delve into. Can you join me though first in welcoming Jad to stage? Welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I know it wasn't too far a flight from Toronto, where you're still based, which is nice. So still on Canadian soil, though probably spending a little bit more time all across the globe.
It's very true. This one is a relatively short hop, and it's great being in Calgary. I haven't been here in a few months now, but at one point, because of my previous role, I was here on a regular basis, and I look forward to being more here. So lots happening in the city, lots happening in the province as well.
Jad and I were just having a quick talk before we came on stage, and one of the first things I wanted to ask you, and I might actually choose to start there because I just think it's interesting sometimes to jump straight into your observations on the conversations we're not having enough. What are we not talking about? For someone who's in the volume of conversations, listening to so many client data points and convening in so many different parts of the world on a weekly and monthly basis. And I'd love you to talk in particular about just the way that you're thinking differently or observing a change in the way we need to approach strategy that maybe we're not observing, but equally the other points that you called out to me. Can you start us there?
Sure. I think the conversation we started having is the fact that at one point, if you go back 20 years ago, companies used to have to put forward a strategy and then execute on that strategy for a few years until something fundamentally shifted. You had a new change in management or a major change in technology, and at that point, companies reassessed their strategy and decided to move one way or the other. Now, companies, and to a large extent, governments as well, are in a constant state of reassessing the environment, making sure that they have a good sense of what's going on. There are multiple triggers that are changing the way companies see their clients, interact with their clients, interact with other different stakeholders. I mean, Greg was a very good example where fusion in 10 years from now might be completely changing how we tap into energy sources. And at this point, we're looking in a very different way. So the triggers for companies to relook at their strategies are constant. There are triggers through transaction, triggers through technology, AI. I'm sure you had enough talks about AI and how fast it's coming on to us. Shocking. The changing in the regulatory environment, the geopolitical tensions are somehow unpredictable. Supply chains are disrupted. So there's always a constant state of change that companies are dealing with, which is a net new norm that we need to get used to.
And one of the things, language I've heard from your EY team is around, you're thinking about it now in terms of a series of big bets too. So you've gone through a process, we've identified a number of significant bets that the organisation is sort of believing are going to form a core part of the way that we need to be thinking and therefore approaching business. Can you talk us through that change in mindset and that process to arrive at what ones you wanted to bet on?
Yeah. Before I get into the big bets, it's important to highlight that agility is a big part of our plans. Obviously, we have a new strategy. We launched a new strategy, and our strategy is under a banner, All In, an all-in banner. And it just talks about how important it is for us to work together. Work together, obviously, there's 400,000 of us within EY, but work all of us together with our clients, with the communities we work and we operate within, with government for us to help shape policy. But collectively, the problems are getting so big that not one group can help solve for them. So all in is the overarching banner that we're operating under. And then obviously under all in, there are a few key elements that I'll touch on. Our new slogan is shape the future with confidence. And you've seen it, I've seen it a few places, in a few spots outside. If you have gone to the
Anyone
EY
who's had a coffee
shop,
or a pastry has definitely seen it.
You would have seen it. And it's very important now with how prevalent technology is and how prevalent artificial intelligence is becoming, for us to still be in control of making sure that we are helping the broader stakeholders and making sure that we shape our collective future with a level of confidence. Humanity has a lot at stake, a lot of upside, but we need to be at the forefront of helping the broader ecosystem to shape the future. So that's one part of it. The other part of it, when it comes to the big bets, the big bets, so we have a few big bets. Artificial intelligence, surprisingly, surprise, is one of them. Transformation and large-scale transformation is one of our overarching big bets. And I touch on the importance of large-scale transformation and what it means for the world in general. Triggers, so when we started looking at how we're gonna put forward our strategy, agility was obviously an overarching theme because we knew we need to potentially change or tailor the approach in 6, 12 months from now. But then we realized as well that there are a lot of specific elements that are moving at different pace. Any company, or whenever you're trying to solve for any problem, you're dealing with a set of variables that in many cases are longer or are more numerous than the number of equations you have. So I go back to calculus. I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old. So I always go back to
you're helping out with calculus homework at the moment, is that what you're telling me?
I was doing this. So if you have more variables than you have equations, you're going to go into a circular solutioning, which is good for experimentation, but it's not going to get you to the end state. So it's very important for us to, when we start looking at how companies are eager and needing to transform, how we help them approach the problem and solutions through an iterative way, while they're confidently building the base as well, and making sure that they're building the foundational elements that are needed to take on the future. So when we look at the role that we collectively need to play in helping everyone shape the future with confidence, agility is one angle, iterative approach is another angle, but we need to have the foundation in place. And until we have the foundation in place, it's going to be very difficult for us to solve for larger problems.
So can I ask about the agility piece? Because I feel probably everyone in the audience can relate to the idea that that feels like something we probably all need more of in our working cultures. And yet when I think about the context of a 400,000 person organization being agile, a lot of people would say that's an oxymoron. That's the type of organization that can't do that, right? Because we often assume that the bigger that you get, the more bureaucracy and process and challenges that just structurally then create inhibitions to being able to be agile. How are you beginning to approach that challenge as an organization of encouraging your workforce to be more agile and fostering those practices?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, because you're right. When you have a big ship, it's difficult to make 90 degree.
And for important reasons too. They're very regulated worlds that you work in and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have two parts of our business, we have multiple parts of our business, but for the purpose of this, what I'm going to talk about, two parts of our business. There's a highly regulated part of our business where there are specific rules and changing regulations. Everyone can relate one way or the other. It takes a lot of time. And then there are other parts of the business where the speed is of the essence. And having a two-speed approach to how we're tackling the business is key. And by the way, what I'm going to talk about here applies to every type of transformation. If you look at a bank, if you look at an oil and gas, a power and utility company, there's a highly regulated part of the business, and there's part of the business that need to keep on evolving very, very fast. And the way I look at it is through nudges.
Okay.
One part of the business you could nudge 1 degree at a time And when you wake up 90 degrees later, you're going in a very different direction. But the frequency and the intentionality of the nudges become key. So it's important to have a North Star and nudge gradually until you move the ship in a direction that's aiming towards the North Star. On the other side, where agility is key and you have the luxury of being very, very agile, we have a couple 100,000 people, it becomes very important, speed becomes of the essence, but what's important as well is to slow down every now and then to make sure that everyone has caught up, or everyone is still within eyesight. Because if we allow for one part of the business to run at 300 miles an hour while everyone else is at 50 miles an hour, it's gonna break. So making sure that the team that's leading from the front is taking a pause, a breather every now and then, and bringing others along to make sure that the direction they're running to makes sense. So the two-speed approach and the nudges, incremental nudges, is how we would tackle agility.
I really like that. For those who are here this morning for Yuval, that call to slow down is sort of a reiteration of one of his big points, that we need a little bit more of that. But I love the idea of the two-speed, which for those who've been in our main stage sessions today, really complementary to both Tom Goodwin and Selda Gunzel in terms of thinking about innovative cultures. Jad, one of the things we were talking about was this incredible workforce profile that you've got. 400,000 employees all across the world, but equally very intergenerational, and probably with one of the youngest sort of median ages. My guess would be that would probably be late 20s, maybe early 30s in EY's business. We've got a very intergenerational attendance group here. We're probably got a whole range of people who are sitting there going, my company's on a journey somewhere in that intergenerational mix. But I'm just interested for how your demographic change, having a growing Gen Z profile of your workforce, how's that forcing the organisation to change? What questions is that generating, and what shifts can you already see?
So you're right, our 400,000 people, average age, high 20s, early 30s, probably closer to high 20s, and that's with me and many other 50-year-old plus in the mix. And that part is not new. So when a few years ago, that was also the case, where we were probably 2 decades ago, we were 100,000 people, and the average age was still in the high 20s. So that part we're used to. The part we're not used to is the intergenerational gap that's existing now between a 50-year-old and a 28-year-old.
Why does it feel so different now versus 10 years ago?
I joke sometimes, and I think I mentioned it to you, Holly, that it does feel to me sometimes that I'm the 50-year-old grandfather of a 28-year-old. So there are 2 or 3 generations, it seems, that we've gone through over the last 20 years. Technology has a lot a big part of the reason. The COVID accelerated a lot of shifts, a lot of moves as well. But when you see how digitally native a 25-year-old is versus how hard I try to keep up as a 50-year-old, and what that means to the way a 25-year-old thinks versus a 50-year-old thinks, we can complement each other beautifully if we're intentional, but we could completely lose the plot and talk very different languages if we are not aware of the differences. I mean, it feels to me sometimes that I need to be giving a 25-year-old the remote control to ask them to change the channel. I feel like I'm like my grandmother 50 years ago, 40 years ago, and she's trying to figure out the TV. Now it's happening so quickly. So what we can give, and the way we're bridging these probably 3 generations, is by embracing how the Gen Z thinks, by making sure that we're fueling them as much as possible and equipping them with the right technology, while we're providing for the advice, the interpersonal relationship building skills that we could share with them, while we're staying true to our values and making sure that we don't deviate from the values. There's a big responsibility that comes with the adoption of new technology. I mean, AI, I'm sure you talked about a lot of the risks earlier today. It comes with a lot of risks. And if we don't have the right overarching themes, advice, risk mitigation principles, it could backfire at so many levels. So we bridge the gap by making sure that obviously our approach, our methodologies are followed, by making sure that we're providing the right advice, oversight, and risk mitigation principles, while we're allowing the next generation to completely embrace technology within a context, within a frame. And bend the frame every now and then, but not snap out of the frame.
If I could pull those maybe two last answers together and ask you another question. You've talked there about the sort of misunderstanding that can sometimes occur when we're seeking to navigate change. And I'm interested around the generational gap component combined in there. The nudges piece that you talked about earlier, I mean, effectively what we're talking about is tough conversations. When we're nudging, we're sort of trying to encourage someone to do something different to what they might have otherwise thought. Some of these intergenerational conversations, we're starting from different places, we're trying to find common ground. How do you, as a leader, personally practice that? We've had a lot of conversations on the need for out-of-the-box thinking, the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion to innovation, but there's a challenge when you then unleash all of that, right? That it can be difficult to then converge and get everyone aligned. How do you approach that challenge?
Alignment is key. Alignment is very important. I mean, obviously, diversity and inclusion is at the core of who we are and building a 400,000 employee organization. Even my previous role, by the way, I was the Canadian chair and CEO, but I was the chief inclusiveness officer, because people are at the core of who we are, and bringing diversity of thought to the table is critical. However, this doesn't come without dangers and without pitfalls as well, because if the diversity of thought is not rooted in common language, you're missing the plot as well. And we see it over and over again, where when we try to solution with a client, or when a client is trying to solution, and you have the CFO talking a very different language than a chief sustainability officer, and they're trying to come to terms or to a common ground of what the solution is, the conversation goes in circle. So making sure that there's alignment in the understanding and the taxonomy of what we're talking about is critical, because you could be bringing very complementary perspectives, but still missing the plot. So making sure that we approach any problem or any solutioning as a team is critical. However, making sure that the team is talking the same language becomes even more critical. So what we do is that we have a lot of open debates. For me, the intellectual debate is a big part of the answer. And feeling safe while we're having the intellectual debate, and making sure that failures are celebrated as much as successes. I mean, we talk about experimentation, but we don't talk enough about failures. And even when you look at the definition of experiments, by default, you need to have a lot of failures.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise you're not really experimenting. So learning from our mistakes fast and moving on is key, and celebrating the failures and on broader stages is something that we pride ourselves on.
It's interesting you say that, because I was thinking about that when you were describing AI earlier, and equally thinking about your role in AI as a partner that so many people across the globe are coming to say, help us work out what this means for our business. Help us unpack the impact this is going to have, and think about the ways we can leverage this technology inside our organizations, and the responsibility that comes with that, and this importance as an organization, I imagine, of fostering this very this delicate tightrope walk of sorts between the confidence you described earlier, but the intellectual humility that you're sort of describing there, right? It's sort of that delicate tightrope walk.
Yes, and layer in the responsibility that we all feel as well, right? So it's delicate, it needs to be, it's big complex problems, they need to be approached with a lot of humility, because we don't know what we don't know. But then there's a lot of responsibility falling on everyone's shoulder here, because we're setting the tone for the next decades, if not next century in a way. And so the debate becomes a big part of the solutioning as well.
Yep.
And when we look at AI, we look at AI through three lenses. There's AI and what it means for us as an organization. It's completely transforming the way we do work. It's completely transforming the way we communicate. It's completely transforming the way we define knowledge and we get to facts. So there's part that's an internal part for us. There's another part where we're working with clients who have start with 10, 20, 30 AI ideas and use cases, and we work with them to take 2 or 3, 5 maximum to the board and say, these are the 5 that we're ready to take on, and this is how we're going to take those on. They're going to cost, they require a lot of capital,
They do.
but they're critical for the survival of many organizations. And then the third part is our role in setting policy. And responsible AI is something that we do need to land on collectively as a global ecosystem. And we're still talking different languages. We're still not, governments are not completely at the same page of what responsible AI means, but we're seeing more and more use cases that lead to the wrong results or inaccurate results because, or unpredictable results because AI was not managed and thought through properly. So making sure that the regulations and policy is well equipped to take on AI is the third pillar.
Joe, when I hear you talk about that context to your business and some of what your organisation are working on and thinking through, it feels that it's quite different, or maybe evolved, from what it might have looked like to be in leadership in the organisation 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You may not agree that it's harder, but it's certainly different. What have you had to intentionally build new leadership muscle in yourself in order to be able to be a more effective leader for your organisation at this moment?
That's a great question. The way I see it, I mean, if you're asking me the question about myself here,
Yeah.
I mean, I always try to expand my comfort zone. It's something that I've been doing since I remember. It's not comfortable, but never give up on expanding the comfort zone. And this is for me individually, but then how it applies to the team and expanding the comfort zone of a team becomes a big part of the MO and how we work together. The easy button can only be pressed 2 or 3 times before it charts a direction. So the easy button is really never an answer. Sometimes I get tired, I smack it and I move on. But I'm way too aware that if I hit the easy button more than frequently enough, it becomes the norm.
Nudges you in the wrong direction.
It nudges me, thank you, in the very, very wrong direction. So making sure that we're always challenging ourselves and we don't get too comfortable. 5, 10 years ago, you're right. I mean, maybe it was not easier, it was very different, where we could have been a bit more comfortable. The difference between a year and another was not that critical. The difference between a month and another made no difference whatsoever. Now things are changing so fast that being able to consume a lot of data points, and then making sure that you're comfortable and going a slightly different direction, knowing that you need to measure monthly progress. It's no longer, you can't wait 3 years to see if you're on the right trajectory. Getting regular updates on performance is something probably net new to how we operate.
I love that call out for getting comfortable being uncomfortable. I often think, no one can sit up here and say they have a guaranteed ability to tell us what the future is going to look like. But one of the things we do know is that uncertainty and pace of change and ambiguity are going to be a constant that we're contending with. And so it feels like a competitive advantage to be able to face into that world with a comfort in being out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowing that, again, as an organization, I mentioned there's a highly regulated part of the business where we can only push the boundaries so much.
Yeah.
But the 2-speed, I go back to the fact that you need 2 speeds, and even as an individual, I need to be able to walk slow in many cases, but at the same time, I need my brain to go at 300 miles an hour and other paces, and I need to find the right balance between the two.
Jad, I'd love to talk to you about the energy transition, because I know it's something EY have a really big stake in. You play an enormous role, it plays an enormous role in your business, you play an enormous role advising businesses all around the world in this space. Particularly, I'd love your view on what we often term the energy trilemma. So that delicate dance between energy security, affordability and sustainability. How do you see that poised at the moment? What cause for concern do you potentially have around trend lines that you're watching? And what role do businesses play in delicately navigating this trilemma so that we can see a more sustainable energy future?
So great question. I love talking about these three in a Venn diagram. So I'm surprised it took me half an hour before I get into Venn diagrams or 2x2.
You and Kamala Harris, there you go.
Yeah.
You both love a Venn diagram.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The intersection point of these three is what's critical. And sometimes we over-rotate on one at the expense of another, and that's not sustainable, right? At the risk, no pun intended. When you look at sustainability, affordability, security, if we over-anchor on one at the expense of the other two, the system is going to pull us back to ground zero. So it's very important for us to find the right balance and make sure that these three are complementary and that we're not doing one at the expense or at the cost of the other two, because they're all three are critically important. And happy to debate why the three are important, but I think we have enough of the speakers highlighted the different elements of those today. So it becomes very critical for us to tackle these three, tackle the trilemma in a way to say that we need affordability. It's critical for the economy, it's critical for society, it's critical for everything that many of us here are standing for. At the same time, if you don't do it in a sustainable way, we're going to be paying the price forever. And if we don't anchor very hard and don't push ourselves to getting there as fast as possible, we're going to be paying the price. Our generation is going to pay the price. The next generation is going to pay that much more the price. And I feel it every now and then when you go outside and you have my asthma gets triggered now much faster than ever before when I'm in highly polluted areas or when there are fires in the air or when there's smoke. So I personally feel it as well, but as a father of two teenage daughters, I feel it that much more. So sustainability is key, and security with everything going on around the world, we know that we need to do it in a secure way, otherwise the whole system could fall apart. So how do we then work to get at the intersection point of that Venn diagram? And the question becomes, can we do it alone? And the easy answer is no. We can't. We need multiple governments, multiple countries to work on it together. We do need a partnership between sector, industry, companies, and government and public sector to get it done. And we don't have a lot of time to figure all of the above. So we need an innovation cycle and an innovation hub that allows for all of the above to happen in a fast way. And if we walk at the pace of the slowest walker between all of the above, we're not going to get there. So this takes me back to the two-speed conversation I started with. We need to allow for the foundational elements to be key, but we do need to allow people like Greg to run very hard and fuel him, and no pun intended, and give him the right capital he needs to get Canada or any friendly other country to get there first and to get there ASAP. And how do we maintain these two speeds, making sure that we do need to be in the intersection point of the Venn diagram becomes critical. And the way I see it, they're complementary, and they might be iterative, but we cannot take years to move from one circle to another. It needs to be a very quick iterative program while we're bringing government and industry along.
And you mentioned Canada there. I said obviously in your introduction you're a former head of EY Canada. I'm interested for your perspective on Canada's role in the energy transition, but also for someone who has had the proximity to this market for the time that you have, your observations around how Canada's navigating that trilemma. Is there any call-outs there that you'd make around anything that needs to be potentially re-examined or adjusted to support greater progress? Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot to be said there. So let me start by saying I'm a very proud Canadian. I'll start with that. When I look at the Canadian positioning, it should be second to none, right? I mean, when you look at we're the 6th largest energy producer, we're the 5th largest natural gas producer, 4th largest crude oil, 2nd largest hydro, but we're not there from a productivity perspective, we're not there from a competitive perspective.
Yeah.
When you look at our productivity, Canada is country number 29 of 38 OECD countries.
That's not great.
No, I mean, again, it pains me to say it, but we've been losing ground and losing ground, and we do need to snap back into a highly productive, highly competitive industry and government. Otherwise, we're going to completely miss the boat. I mean, being in the bottom quartile or very close on the edge of the bottom quartile from productivity, while we're sitting on all these beautiful resources, is something that needs to get worked on. And how we work on it needs to be approached through a public-private partnership. So we need companies to take on a leadership role in making sure that we're driving for energy transition, we're driving in innovation, we're driving in adoption of innovation, while we make sure that we don't leave anyone truly behind. Energy transition needs to be a responsible transition.
What's the missing catalyst? I just felt compelled to ask there.
There are many things. I mean,
Okay.
for me, if you look at our structure, with what's driving province versus what's driving federal, there's a lot of friction there, and that takes a while. If you look at our regulatory tax system as well, it just doesn't induce a lot of these, a free flow of capital and ideas into Canada, but even within Canada as well. Doing business in Canada is not the easiest country to do business in when it comes to getting permits, when it comes to starting up a company, when it comes to getting capital, when it comes to accepting and approving and celebrating failures. We don't do it. I mean, if you look in other countries, they celebrate failures much faster than we do. They lick their wounds and we move on. There's a lot at stake for us, and we do need to get it right. Only, I think we have everything we need to get it right. We need the right catalyst to do so, though.
Great. Well, that's a great call to action to finish on there. We have all the things we need to get it right. We just need a little bit more momentum going on into some of those things there, a bit more of that culture of experimentation and being prepared to have a go, as was encouraged there. Love the call outs around two-speed economy, a lot of really interesting insights there around how to avoid intergenerational misunderstanding. Fantastic, Jad, to have you here. Thank you so much for the conversation and for your insights. Can you join me in thanking Jad Shimaly?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jad.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.